Great. Well, yeah, I'm done. No, I don't know. I think I'll just react to what Mark said because I don't think I have anything original to add. I mean, it's important to recognize, they call us the dismal science. There's some evidence for why, which if you poll people on what they like about the Affordable Care Act, they like everything except the two things we like. They like everything except the mandate and the Cadillac tax, which are the two things that we like. That's the part real people don't like. So, look, we have to do, I'd be remiss if I didn't do the obligatory few minutes of praise for Mark and his role in all this. He is the father of the individual mandate. He could have changed his kids' names to individual mandate or something like that. But he's the father of it. And I also think, I look around, I'm actually on the older side of the crowd here. So probably in my economics lifetime, the two most important articles I think I read were Joe Newhouse's 1992 JEP article and Mark's 1990 JEL article on the tax exclusion, which really was the centerpiece of arguing, really bring to the fore why this is a terrible piece of policy and we need to address it. And I think it was that which motivated sort of a generation of us to make this the top of our agenda, and I think it was that hard fighting which led us to, for the first time, take it on. If you'd said to me, in 2008, which is more likely that we'll pass a law that covers 25 million people, we'll pass a law which takes on the employer exclusion, I would have said definitely the former. There's no way we can take on the employer exclusion. The fact that we've done it even this indirect way is, I think, just a testament to the leadership Mark showed in highlighting this and the fact that we've all followed up and really, really pushed on it. I want to react to a few things that Mark said. Let's start with the interesting point about the mandate and what role it plays more generally. I think the right way to think about this is think about three reasons why people are uninsured. One reason is affordability. One reason is sort of strategic, people relying in the emergency room. And one reason we could call sort of uninformed / they don't have / they're lazy. So the story I always think of is in Jonathan Cohen's book, Sick. He's a story of the mother in Detroit who had to get up at 5 in the morning to go to her job. She got home at 8 at night. She knew she should go sign up for health insurance. She just never had time, and then she got cancer. And basically, the mandate's about affecting all of those groups. And we tend to think about the strategic because we're economists and that's fun. But it does affects the affordability because it makes insurance affordable for sick people. And it affects this other group, the sort of people who say, gee, I really should go do this and now I'm going to go do it. Now that does come to the penalty, which is too small. Now the story here is, it's politics. I think a lot of my reaction to Mark's comment is going to be the politics. So what happened here is, as you know, the Senate finance bills basically became the law because I must remember on Christmas Eve, the Senate had just passed their bill, had just passed their version, the House had passed their version. We all planned to make it work in conference. Christmas Eve, I went to it with my family. My wife said, hey, it's great, you're done. I said, yeah, the only thing to go wrong would be for a Republican won Ted Kennedy's seat, and what's the odds of that? Well, a Republican did win Ted Kennedy's seat, which meant we couldn't go to conference, so we had to basically live with the Senate finance bill. And what happened there was the Senate finance bill was a great bill with a very large mandate penalty, and the night before it was voted out of committee, Olympia Snowe, who was Republican, so didn't like anything that smelled of taxes, and Chuck Schumer, who, as far as I can tell, doesn't understand economics, got together and said, we ought to lower this mandate penalty. And so they put an amendment before the committee to lower the mandate penalty, and who's going to vote against that? It's a single amendment. So it passed, and the mandate penalty got shrunk down. So it really is unfortunately too low, and it's actually backwards. The mandate penalty ramps up. Actually, mandate penalty should ramp down, right? It should be you get shocked the first to get you in the system. Once you're in the system, we'll need the mandate penalty less. So actually the timing is backwards and the level's too small. So that's unfortunate. That's something ideally we'd change, but we never will. Coming to the Cadillac tax, that really was all about the politics. Mark talked about two forms of politics, but it was all about the politics. Actually, so once again, what happened there was we actually had Max Baucus convinced that we should do a Pauli-like cap on the employer exclusion. He was all set to pass it, and then the unions went nuts, and people went nuts, and he said, this is over. And then John Kerry, or more likely his staff, came up with this very clever idea of the Cadillac tax, which is, I don't know, I would say, I guess, 70% as good as doing the right thing. So it's 70% as good in the sense that it's going to have a lot of the same effects, in the sense it's a 40% excise tax that happens to people with the highest marginal rate, so essentially offsets the exclusion. What's wrong with it is two things. One is, well, 40% isn't everybody's rate, and we really want to, in some sense, this is penalizing insurance. We want to level the playing field. We don't want to penalize insurance purchase. This is actually penalizing insurance purchase for lower tax rate people. But it's worse than that, because the Cadillac tax isn't deductible from corporate income. So actually, it's effectively, so what that means, you have to raise the price more than 40%, so that the revenues you get, you can account for taxes. And when you work out the dynamic logic, it's more than 100% tax, actually. So, I hate to speak ill of it because it's better than nothing, but it really is not, it's not a Pauli-like removal of the exclusion. It's actually just really a ceiling. No one's going to have insurance that costs more than this because it's more than 100% tax on insurance that costs above that level. That's not really rational. I still think it's better than nothing. I still would rather have that than have the existing system, but it's not. But my hope is that as it gets to 2018 and people focus on the fact that this is really a very draconian tax, we can then reopen the discussion about doing the more rational thing. I recently did a paper for Bipartisan Policy Commission. We estimated that if you take the existing system, if you put a cap at the 80th percentile and CPI index it, you raise about $200 billion more than the Cadillac tax over the next 10 years. So basically, I think there's going to be an argument made, hopefully, for moving back towards the right Pauli-like solution, and hopefully we'll get there. Mark made a couple of comments that I do want to take issue with. One about transparency financing, and the other is about moving from community rating to risk-rated subsidies. It's just, you can't do it politically. You just literally cannot do it. Okay, transparent financing, unless I have transparent financing, also transparent spending. I mean, this bill was written in a tortured way to make sure CBO did not score the mandate as taxes. If CBO scored the mandate as taxes, the bill dies. Okay, so it's written to do that. In terms of risk-rated subsidies, if you had a law which said healthy people are going to pay in, it made explicit that healthy people pay in and sick people get money, it would not have passed. Okay, just like lack of transparency is a huge political advantage. And basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever. But basically, that was really, really critical to getting the thing to pass. And, it's the second best argument. Look, I wish Mark was right. We can make it all transparent. But I'd rather have this law than not. So it's kind of like his reporter story. Yeah, there's things I wish I could change, but I'd rather have this law than not. And I think that involves some trade-offs that, we don't prefer as academic economists, but which are realistic. Let's talk also a little about Oregon. So I was one of the co-conspirators in the Oregon study. Two comments on the Oregon study. First of all, I think that there is no perfect economic study. And you have to put this in the context of a large literature which does show positive health benefits of expanding insurance, including studies that have been done in Massachusetts law, which has shown large health benefits of expanding insurance in Massachusetts, as well as all the Medicaid research that I did a long time ago and others have done. So I think this is a worrisome finding in that sense, but it does not mean we know the answer is no health effects. It just means, we're a little more uncertain than, I basically view it as raising our confidence intervals from where we were. The second thing is, and I just can't emphasize this enough, we did find huge mental health effects. And mental health is health. Okay, we tend to focus on kind of it's heart attacks or nothing. That's not true. Okay, mental health matters. Now, Mark's right. It's not clear that the right way to get to mental health is through health insurance. A lot of this wasn't Prozac. This was ending the stress people lived under. There was a 30% drop in depression. 30%. And that wasn't more Prozac. That was the fact these uninsured people lead horribly stressful lives. And we found enormous increase in happiness, enormous reductions in depression. And I think as economists, we need to broaden our concept of what insurance is about. Now, Mark is right. Once we do that, we then have to stack up insurance against other things which could have these effects. And that's fine. Let's run that. Let's run that race. But I think the fact it doesn't, and once again, we can have confidence intervals and other things. But just in general, the fact that it didn't find effects on physical health, people tend to extrapolate and say there's no effect on health. That's not true. There was huge effects on mental health, and that matters. Okay, so I think we have to keep that in mind when we discuss the Oregon effects. In terms of other changes to the law and things to keep an eye on, okay, some more sort of smaller subsets to keep an eye on. One, so I talked about the Cadillac tax, talked about the mandate. Another thing to keep an eye on is actually, once again, another political constraint. The way the law works is the subsidies people pay as a percent of income. The percent of income they pay actually ramps up over time. Basically, it's complicated, but percent of income you pay is indexed. Essentially, the percent of income you pay grows with the gap between healthcare cost growth and income growth. So if healthcare costs grow at the rate of GDP, then people at the top always pay 9.5% of their income to get subsidies, people 3 to 4 times poverty. But if the rate of healthcare cost growth exceeds GDP growth, that percent of income you pay grows. So it could be, under current projections, by 10 or 15 years from now, people aren't paying 9.5% of their income, they're paying 17% of their income. Okay, so that's sort of a bit of a time bomb hidden in this law. Now at the same time, Cadillac's tax revenues will grow enormously if that happens. So we could take that money and use it to solve this problem, but that is something to keep an eye on. The second thing to keep an eye on is cost-sharing subsidies. So low-income people, There's two forms of subsidy. There's subsidies you pay a fixed percent of income, and there's subsidies to sort of buy down your cost sharing if you're low income. Those are very nice if you're below about 150% of poverty. They're not nearly generous enough between 150 and 300% of poverty. You're going to have people at 2 and 2.5 times poverty in $3,000 deductible plans. That's 10% of their income plus. That could be an issue, and that's something we have to keep an eye on. Another example of the horrible features of our current political system, in the law is this bizarre feature that for small businesses only, the maximum deductible is set to $2,000. Not for people, not for large businesses. Why is this? It's because Olympia Snow staffer was an idiot. And Olympia Snow staffer saw that in Massachusetts we'd done this. He said this is the national law. And Obama was desperate to have a Republican on the law. So he said, well, if it'll make Olympia Snow happy, let's put it in the bill, we'll get rid of it in conference. Well, then conference never happened, so the law actually features this weird glitch that for only small businesses, the deductible is limited to $2,000. Not indexed, just $2,000. Well, everyone agrees that's a bad idea, left and right alike, but you can't reopen the law, so we can't get rid of it. That's the kind of thing that we just need to get rid of, and hopefully someday we'll have a good enough political environment that we can do something like that. And then I think Mark's entirely right about the employer mandate. That was just political cover. I mean, it's a decent source of revenue raising. It's like $10 billion a year, so it's real money. But it really isn't central to the law. I think there's this unfortunate focus on what happens to employer-sponsored insurance. What happens to employer-sponsored insurance is irrelevant. Okay? What should matter is what happens to overall insurance coverage. We shouldn't care where people get it from. And so I think the employer mandate, and I think there's a decent chance it may eventually go away, because I think it's a source of an enormous number of political problems with the law. Let me just end with a couple last things so we have to keep an eye on in terms of research, thinking going forward. A bit of it self-serving. I think we need to really think about basically decision support within the exchanges. You know, we're entering a brand new world that started with Part D and is now extending the ACA of people making choices over their health insurance plans. And as Jason and I have shown in the context of Part D, and we're hoping to show in future research, or look at in future research in the context of broader health insurance, there's a potential for people to make bad choices or inconsistent choices. And the question is, can decision support play a role in mitigating that? I think that's a really important question. And more broadly, there's just the question of exchange design. Amanda Stark and Keith Erickson have this really neat paper showing that a more standardized exchange design in Massachusetts was welfare improving. What is the optimal exchange design? So one last sort of inside baseball story. In Massachusetts, we went to, as you know, you should all read their paper if you haven't, but we went to, after a couple of years, a standardized design where we sort of standardized the benefits. And people really liked it, and according to their paper, it was welfare improving. The problem was no small businesses were buying through the exchange. So we asked them why, and they said because the benefits were too standardized. They said you don't have all these funky options we like. So we actually have gone now for a mixed strategy, which is we have standardized benefits and another tier we call unstandardized. Kind of saying, look, if you want to take the chance of going unstandardized, go for it. We'll let you have that. But if you want to sort of not have to face those difficult decisions, we go standardized. Is that the right thing to do? Embarrassingly, I have no idea. So that's the kind of thing we need to be thinking more about. And then I think, you know, the last thing I just emphasize is we need to be thinking more broadly, coming back to the Oregon results, health insurance in the context of overall well-being of our national enterprise. And that ultimately, that's what we care about, is the well-being of our citizenry. And we have to think about that more broadly. And I think the Oregon results, along with, you know, Amy Finkelstein and Rob McKnight's results showing that Medicare didn't seem to improve health, but massively improve financial security, make us think we have to think about what's the ultimate structure of the safety net that makes sense. And maybe Mark's right. Maybe it's not health insurance. Maybe it's just, you know, as Avi Groy said, maybe it's just money and Prozac in the water. Maybe that's where we need to be. But we need to be thinking about sort of what's the ultimate structure of the social insurance enterprise. So let me stop there.
Thanks, John.